They destroyed old Martha. That massive 8-pound largemouth bass visited my pier each dawn for 36 months. I'd christened her, nourished her, observed her development. Now she drifted lifeless alongside 200 other fish because my homeowners, association chairman, believes she controls my pond. The chemical odor seared my airways at daybreak, acrid copper sulfate blended with decomposing fish. Victoria Thornwood had discharged $3,500 worth of commercial algicide into my pristine waters during darkness, transforming them in unnatural turquoise. I gripped Martha's cold, dead form, trembling with absolute fury. Then clarity struck like lightning. Victoria's upscale development draws their potable water from the identical subterranean aquifer feeding my pond. Each gallon, every residence, 847 households. She hadn't merely destroyed my fish population. She'd contaminated her own community's water source, and she remained oblivious to the approaching storm. Ever encountered neighbors convinced they could devastate your land simply because your activities displeased them? Share your location in the comments. If you've experienced homeowner association horror stories, document them below. This situation escalates dramatically. I'm Daniel Thompson, 52 years old, never anticipating warfare against someone whose nail appointments probably exceed my weekly earnings. But suburban life delivers these surprises. I'm a former electrical contractor now specializing in renewable energy installation here in Cedarbrook, North Carolina, the type who repairs things personally and believes individuals should respect boundaries. My 12-acre tract with its aquifer-fed pond has belonged to my lineage since 1952, when tobacco cultivation and common decency dominated this region. Each morning I traversed the gravel pathway my grandfather constructed, boots crunching stones polished by generations of anglers. The pier boards feel weathered beneath my palms, damp with morning moisture. That fragrant jasmine scent mingles with the crisp mineral aroma of spring water. Egrets roost in the bold cypress. They surface at sunrise. For 70 years, this sanctuary represented absolute tranquility. Then construction companies arrived. 15 years passed. They acquired surrounding acreage and erected Magnolia Ridge Estates, 847 oversized homes beginning at $600,000. They proposed millions for my property, coveting my pond for their country club. I suggested they invest their capital elsewhere. Most new residents proved agreeable. Ordinary folks who acknowledged passing joggers, occasionally inquired about fishing conditions. Then Victoria Thornwood relocated here. Envision this, 47 years old, operates a pearl-white luxury sedan detailed more frequently than most people bathe, carries a professional organizer to casual gatherings. She converses like an attorney ordering coffee, deploying terminology like property value enhancement and visual compliance, protocols, the personality type scheduling restroom, visits. Victoria appointed herself association president within 6 months, immediately launching improvement initiatives, sophisticated language for making everyone miserable, until they submitted to her suburban autocracy. Her initial attack arrived 3 months post-relocation. Certified correspondence, official stationery, complete theatrics. My aesthetically objectionable angling activities allegedly disturbed her peaceful neighborhood enjoyment. $800,000 she invested for lakefront scenery, and observing me harvest dinner somehow diminished her investment. Legal intimidation escalated rapidly. She alleged my pier violated aesthetic regulations supposedly applicable to all regional properties. This person actually demanded I dismantle a structure predating her birth. I contacted my associate Robert Martinez, real estate attorney who'd rescued me previously. He nearly choked laughing. Daniel, properties predating association establishment cannot face retroactive covenant enforcement. She's threatening with non-existent statutes. Important principle. If your property existed before an association formed, their regulations generally cannot apply retroactively to your land. Your deed date provides legal protection. When intimidation failed, Victoria filed fraudulent county complaints about my unauthorized pier structure. The inspector arrived, examined my 1987 permits, and apologized for the inconvenience. You could practically observe his exasperation. That's when her true character emerged. Every morning I'd fish at 6, when bass feed actively, and suddenly Victoria required emergency landscaping. Leaf blowers, chainsaws, commercial mowers, all operating at maximum decibels along her property boundary. Diesel exhaust would drift across my pond, corrupting jasmine with highway construction zone odors. Her crew accumulated more overtime in 2 months than most see annually, all because one individual fished his own property. But I continued fishing. Some principles warrant defending against suburban dictators with excessive resources and insufficient judgment. I had no comprehension Victoria was merely beginning. And I certainly didn't realize she'd resort to environmental sabotage. Know what's worse than an entitled lawyer? An entitled lawyer wielding property surveys as warfare implements. 2 weeks after the county inspector dismissed her fraudulent peer complaint, Victoria hired the region's most expensive surveyor to verify property boundaries, not because any question existed. My grandfather marked those lines with concrete, monuments that'll probably outlast humanity. This represented pure harassment with professional billing. The Thidori surveyor appeared Tuesday morning with equipment exceeding my vehicle's value, lights, GPS units, laser levels costing more hourly than most people earn daily. I observed from my kitchen window, consuming coffee and enjoying the spectacle as they spent 6 hours measuring the identical boundary legally established since Truman's presidency. 3 days later, Victoria's attorney transmitted registered correspondence claiming my peer extended precisely 6 inches onto communal water rights. 6 inches, on a pond owned by my family since before her existence. But Victoria really revealed herself when she filed actual county court litigation for property encroachment. Professional letterhead, court documentation, filing fees exceeding most people's monthly car payments, all concerning 6 inches of pier space. When this woman commits to destroying someone's existence, she's thorough. While her legal documents processed, she launched a social media campaign that would impress political operatives, posted in the Magnolia Ridge Estates group about her difficult neighbor refusing to respect community standards. The comment section transformed into a digital mob faster than you could say property values. But two can conduct research. I spent my weekend in the county courthouse basement, breathing dust probably older than Victoria's career, excavating deed records and property transfers. Sometimes, optimal revenge simply means superior knowledge, and I struck gold. My grandfather didn't merely own the land, he owned exclusive water rights to the entire pond system, every drop, every fish, every molecule. The original 1952 deed specifically included all water rights, surface and subsurface, including natural springs and tributaries thereof. But here's the beautiful part that made me laugh until tears formed. The pond feeds from a subterranean aquifer, extending directly beneath Victoria's subdivision. Legally, every time her neighbors flush toilets, they're using my water. Critical principle. Water rights often transfer separately from land ownership and appear in property deeds. These rights can exceed land value itself. I contacted Robert Martinez with my discovery. After his laughter subsided, he said, "Daniel, you don't merely possess a defense. You've got a nuclear option disguised as property documentation." We filed counterclaims for harassment, defamation, and abusive legal process. But the timing? Pure artistry. Victoria was hosting one of her elaborate backyard dinner parties, 40-plus. Association residents standing around with wine glasses, complaining about property, taxes while consuming food costing more per bite than most people's lunches. Right during Victoria's speech about maintaining community standards and property values, our sheriff's deputy walked through her back gate. "Ma'am, I need to serve you with legal documents." 40 conversations ceased mid-sentence. The only sound was ice rattling nervously in glasses as Victoria's hands trembled reading the papers. "This is harassment." She shrieked loud enough to rattle windows. "That blue-collar troublemaker is trying to intimidate me with frivolous lawsuits." There it was, the mask completely dropped. The refined real estate attorney became just another suburban tyrant, having a meltdown because someone dared resist. Her dinner guests suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Amazing how rapidly wealthy people evacuate when someone starts screaming classist insults at catered events. But Victoria wasn't finished. Next morning, I discovered an anonymous note under my windshield wiper. "Stop fishing or face consequences." Apparently, public humiliation just made her more dangerous. Anonymous threats have charm. But Victoria's next move represented straight governmental weaponization. Within a week of my counterclaim, I had more government inspectors examining my property than a drug laboratory raid. Fish and Wildlife arrived first, clipboards ready, alleging they needed to investigate potential disruption to migratory bird patterns caused by my angling activities. I'm serious. This woman actually convinced a federal agency that me catching bass somehow interfered with waterfowl navigation systems. The Environmental Protection Agency inspector arrived next, equipped like he was entering a radiation zone, armed with water analysis kits and documentation thicker than Victoria's legal expenses. Apparently, my private pond usage might generate environmental hazards. The profound irony of that accusation would hit me like a freight train shortly. County Health Department Thursday morning. Code Enforcement Friday afternoon. By week's end, I possessed more regulatory business cards than a Washington lobbyist. Each inspector discovered exactly what you'd expect from the cleanest pond in 3 counties. Absolutely nothing problematic. But bureaucratic harassment functions bidirectionally, and I was learning to navigate it. While Victoria played puppet master with government agencies, I was befriending the puppets. Turns out when you're courteous to overworked civil servants forced to investigate obviously frivolous complaints, they remember you. They also remember who's wasting their time. Dorothy Martinez became my secret, ally 68-year-old retired county clerk with memory like steel and a grudge against corrupt developers. Over coffee tasting like justice and caffeine, she dropped a bombshell that made my head spin. Daniel, that entire subdivision was constructed on protected wetlands. The developer secured permits by promising to preserve all natural water features permanently. It's federal statute. The coffee cup felt warm in my palms as implications registered. Key principle. Development permits often contain perpetual preservation clauses legally binding all future property owners. Violating these environmental restrictions can trigger massive federal penalties. I spent the following weekend playing environmental detective, and my discoveries exceeded lottery winnings. Victoria's landscaping contractor, the same diesel-belching crew serenading my fishing trips, was using my pond as their personal disposal site. Grass clippings, hedge trimmings, fertilizer-saturated debris, all flowing directly into federally protected wetlands. Every Saturday morning at dawn, like clockwork, I became an environmental photographer, concealing myself in the tree line with my camera, while jasmine scent mixed with diesel exhaust. Rough oak bark pressed against my spine as I waited for perfect shots. 3rd Saturday consecutively, I captured them dumping organic waste straight into my water, the splash echoing across the still morning air. The photographs were beautiful, time-stamped, GPS located, high-resolution evidence of federal crimes occurring in broad daylight. But the real jackpot came when I ran their license through the state database. Elite Landscaping, LLC was 40% owned by Richard Thornwood, Victoria's husband, real estate developer, and apparently part-time. Environmental criminal. The EPA doesn't just appreciate environmental violations with photographic evidence. They worship them when connected to harassment campaigns. I filed my complaint Monday morning, with a smile that could have powered half the county. By Wednesday, Elite Landscaping was under federal investigation. Richard lost 3 county contracts by Friday. Turns out when you're dumping organic waste in protected wetlands, municipalities suddenly don't want you maintaining their public parks. Shocking. The sound of Victoria's perfectly controlled world beginning to fracture was sweeter than church bells Sunday morning. But if I thought environmental violations would humble her, I was about to learn just how spectacularly wrong one person can be. Nothing makes a desperate woman more dangerous than watching her husband's business empire crumble because of her personal vendetta. And Victoria Thornwood was about to prove she'd rather incinerate the neighborhood than admit defeat. The morning I found the Algicide Company's business card tucked under my windshield wiper, I knew we'd crossed from legal warfare into something much darker. The card smelled faintly of chlorine and desperation. Environmental terrorism was apparently Victoria's next strategy. Too bad she didn't realize she was about to poison her own drinking water. That business card wasn't just a threat, it was a confession waiting to happen. But I had no idea Victoria was about to commit the kind of environmental crime that would make hardened EPA agents weep. While I visited Sandra's sister in Charlotte, Victoria was busy researching algae management solutions like she was preparing for environmental warfare. she found AquaClear Solutions, a commercial algaecide company, specializing in industrial-strength pond treatments, the kind of chemicals that can sterilize a pond faster than you can say property values. Here's where Victoria's lawyer brain really shined. She called AquaClear and lied through her perfectly veneered teeth, claiming my pond was community property experiencing a dangerous algae bloom threatening public health. $3,500 cash paid up front for a midnight chemical assault on what she told them was an emergency environmental situation. The irony would have been hilarious if it wasn't about to murder everything I loved. I came home Sunday evening to the smell, hitting me before I even exited my truck. That sharp metallic stench of copper sulfate mixed with mass death. The pond water had turned an unnatural blue-green color like antifreeze mixed with apocalypse. Old Martha was floating 20 feet from the pier, her massive body already bloated in the contaminated water. 3 years of morning feedings, watching her grow from decent-sized base into a pond legend, and now she was just another casualty in Victoria's suburban genocide. 200 other fish floated alongside her. Bluegill, crappie, catfish. An entire ecosystem assassinated overnight because one woman couldn't tolerate watching someone enjoy their own property. My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone, the smooth plastic slippery with sweat and pure rage. The county environmental emergency hotline connected me to Officer James Patterson, who'd been investigating illegal dumping for 15 years. When I described the aquatic crime scene, his voice shifted from routine bureaucrat to emergency mode. Don't touch anything, keep pets away, and don't disturb the evidence. I'm bringing the hazmat team. Patterson arrived with water, analysis equipment that looked like it belonged on Mars. The test strips turned colors that don't exist in nature, deep blues and purples, screaming massive chemical contamination. The acrid smell of testing chemicals mixed with pond death made my eyes water. Industrial-strength copper sulfate poisoning, he said, his voice tight with professional fury. Whoever did this didn't just kill your fish. They sterilized the entire ecosystem for 2 to 3 years minimum. This is felony property destruction, possibly federal environmental terrorism. Critical principle. Illegal dumping of industrial chemicals on private property constitutes felony destruction in most states and triggers federal environmental crime charges, carrying 5 to 10-year prison sentences. But Patterson wasn't done playing detective. While I stood there holding a garbage bag that used to be my fishing paradise, he was reviewing security footage from Mrs. Henderson's doorbell camera across the street. The video was crystal clear. AquaClear Solutions truck arriving at 2:17 a.m. 2 figures in protective suits dumping death directly into my pond, vanishing by 2:43 a.m., 26 minutes to destroy 70 years of family heritage. That evening, I sat on my pier holding one of the smaller dead bass, remembering my grandfather teaching me to cast in this exact spot. The wooden planks felt cold and splintered under my legs, and the silence was absolutely deafening. No birds, no insects, no life around water that used to bubble with activity. Sandra found me there an hour later, both of us crying as we started the nightmare cleanup of environmental terrorism. But grief sharpens focus like nothing else. As we filled garbage bag after garbage bag with Victoria's victims, my electrician brain started connecting dots. I'd installed solar panels on dozens of houses in this subdivision. I knew their utility systems intimately. Every house in Magnolia Ridge Estates uses well water pumped from the same underground spring system that feeds my pond. The same aquifer, the same water source, the same copper sulfate contamination now flowing through limestone channels toward 847 unsuspecting homes. I had my water tested the next morning by an independent lab. The results made my blood run cold. Copper sulfate levels 4 times higher than EPA-safe drinking water standards. Victoria hadn't just poisoned my pond. She'd contaminated her entire neighborhood's water supply. Every faucet, every shower, every ice cube maker in that pristine subdivision was now serving up industrial toxins. The woman who spent months complaining about my unsightly fishing activities had just turned her perfect community into a toxic waste site, and she was about to drink her own poison. Sweet. Sweet karma never tasted so metallic. You know that moment when you're researching one thing and accidentally discover nuclear codes hidden in your grandmother's recipe box? That's basically what happened when I decided to dig deeper into my grandfather's property records. I thought I was building a stronger legal defense against Victoria's lawsuit. What I found instead was the equivalent of owning the only water well in a desert full of thirsty people. Monday morning, I drove back to the county courthouse basement. That special kind of government purgatory that smells like old paper, dust mites, and crushed dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps while I dug through file boxes that hadn't been touched since people thought Y2K would end. Civilization. The original deed transfer from 1952 was buried under decades of irrelevant paperwork. My fingers were black with archival dust when I finally found it. Written in that formal legal language designed to make normal humans fall asleep. Then I hit the paragraph that made my heart stop. Including all water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereof, in perpetuity. Latin for forever and ever. My grandfather hadn't just bought land, he'd bought every drop of water flowing through the underground spring system extending for miles beneath what would eventually become Victoria's precious subdivision. Sat there in that dusty basement, hands trembling, holding a 70-year-old document that just made me the most powerful person in 3 counties. The paper felt thin and fragile, but the words on it were stronger than titanium. Here's where it gets absolutely delicious. I pulled the Magnolia Ridge Estates development records from 2008. The developer water usage permit application claimed they'd be drilling independent wells with sustainable water sources, independent wells that tap directly into my grandfather's spring system 400 feet downstream from my pond, every single one of them. The developer never purchased water rights because he probably didn't even know they existed as a separate asset. Most people don't. They think owning land means owning whatever water's underneath it. Wrong. Expensive assumption. Career-ending mistake. Essential principle. Water rights are completely separate from land ownership and must be explicitly transferred. Failure to secure these rights can expose developers and homeowners to massive legal liability and usage fees. For 15 years, 847 families had been using my water without permission, without compensation, and without even knowing their most hated neighbor literally owned every drop flowing from their taps. The math alone made my head spin. Average household water usage times 847 homes times 15 years, times market rate for water rights. We're talking tens of millions of dollars in back payments I could legally demand. But the contamination angle, that was the diamond sitting on top of this. Legal goldmine. Every home in that subdivision was now drinking water poisoned by Victoria's midnight chemical warfare. Copper sulfate symptoms include stomach pain, nausea, liver damage, and in children, developmental problems. The EPA treats this as a public health emergency worthy of federal intervention. Victoria's lawsuit against me for 6 inches of pier space suddenly looked like a toddler, threatening a heavyweight champion. Called Robert Martinez from the parking lot. Sunshine warming the truck's interior while my world tilted on its axis. Robert, I don't just own the pond. I own their entire water supply. Every drop they've used for 15 years is legally mine. The silence stretched so long I checked if my phone had died. Daniel, he finally whispered, you're not defending against a property dispute anymore. You're sitting on the biggest water rights case this state has ever seen, and if that contamination spreads through the aquifer, he didn't finish. We both knew Victoria had poisoned 847 homes using water that belonged to me. The power dynamic just shifted so hard I could feel the earth move under Victoria's designer heels. When you discover you're sitting on a legal nuclear weapon, you don't just start swinging it around like a drunk guy at a bar fight. You assemble a team of highly trained specialists who know exactly where to aim. First call went to Rachel Torres, environmental lawyer out of Raleigh, who'd built her career destroying corporations that thought poisoning communities was just good business. Her office smelled like expensive espresso and vendetta when I walked in Tuesday morning. Water rights violation, environmental contamination, public health emergency, she said, eyes gleaming as she reviewed my documents. Daniel, this isn't a lawsuit. This is a masterclass in legal warfare. That'll be taught in law schools for decades. Rachel's strategy was beautiful. Hit them from every direction simultaneously before they even know they're under attack. Federal lawsuit for water rights theft. EPA emergency intervention for contamination. State criminal charges for illegal dumping. Civil suits for property damage, emotional distress, and punitive damages that would make a lottery winner blush. Legal tactic. Overwhelming opponents with simultaneous legal actions from multiple jurisdictions forces immediate defensive positions. They'll be too busy extinguishing fires to mount any coordinated counterattack. Second recruit was Dr. James Mitchell, hydrogeologist from North Carolina State, who makes opposing lawyers weep during depositions. We met at my poisoned pond Wednesday morning, where he spent 4 hours taking samples and mapping the underground spring system with equipment that probably cost more than my truck. Fascinating aquifer structure, he said, kneeling in contaminated water that still reeked of chemicals. His hands moved precisely through testing procedures, while dragonflies that used to swarm here were notably absent. Single-source spring feeding directly into residential wells. Contamination will reach every home within 6 to 8 weeks. We're looking at 800 to 900 affected properties. The scientific hammer that would crush any doubt about Victoria's guilt. Third team member was Sarah Morgan, investigative journalist who'd spent 3 years taking down corrupt HOAs like she was collecting scalps. Her exposés had destroyed 2 HOA presidents for embezzlement and one who was literally running a protection racket. When she saw my evidence, she looked like a kid on Christmas morning. "This is Pulitzer-level material," she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table with reverent excitement. Power-drunk HOA tyrant poisons entire neighborhood while terrorizing the guy who legally owns their water supply. CNN will fight MSNBC for first interview rights. Sarah's background check on Victoria read like a serial killer's resume. 3 previous neighborhoods, 4 harassment lawsuits, 2 restraining orders for stalking behavior. The woman had a documented 20-year pattern of destroying anyone who dared challenge her authority. Dorothy Martinez provided the historical ammunition. Over dinner coffee that tasted like justice and bottomless refills. She showed me permit applications proving the original developer had committed outright fraud, claiming water rights he never purchased, never owned, never even verified existed. Every homeowner bought property under false pretenses, Dorothy explained, her weathered fingers tapping yellowed documents. They think they own water access. Legally, they've been stealing from you for 15 years. Rachel crunched numbers with calculator precision. Market rate for water rights in our county, $50 per household monthly, times 847 homes, times 180 months, $30,600,000 in back payments I could legally demand. That's before calculating punitive damages for the contamination. Financial strategy. In water rights cases, calculate both direct usage fees and consequential damages from environmental contamination. Combined liability often forces settlements before opponents can mount defenses, but here's where I made the decision that separated justice from revenge. I wasn't going to financially destroy 800 innocent families just to punish one psychotic woman. We offer settlement, Rachel proposed. Waive all back payments for 3 things: complete pond restoration, Victoria's resignation, plus criminal prosecution and permanent oversight preventing future abuse. Dr. Mitchell designed the restoration plan right there. 18 months using natural bioremediation, native fish restocking, aquatic plant restoration. Cost, $250,000 paid jointly by HOA funds and Victoria personally. Sarah coordinated media timing, simultaneous story release with legal filing for maximum public pressure. She'd already pitched NPR, Washington Post environmental desk, and 3 cable networks salivating over the HOA Karen poisons neighborhood water supply angle. The plan was elegant. Hit Victoria with federal charges, state charges, civil liability, and national media exposure simultaneously. Give the innocent homeowners a path forward that didn't bankrupt them. Force accountability without collective punishment. We had evidence that could convict. We had expert testimony that couldn't be challenged. We had media ready to turn Victoria into a national symbol of HOA tyranny. And we had moral high ground that would play beautifully in court and public opinion. Now we just needed the perfect stage for Victoria's very public downfall. You know what's beautiful about watching someone's world crumble? The moment they realize their cover-up is actually making everything worse, but they're too deep to stop digging. Victoria discovered the water contamination exactly the way karma intended, through her neighbors' complaints about the metallic taste in their morning coffee. Within a week of poisoning my pond, the Magnolia Ridge Estates Facebook group exploded with posts about weird-tasting water and strange smell from the taps. Parents complained their kids were getting stomach aches. One woman posted about her dog refusing to drink from its bowl. The comment section transformed into a digital panic room. Victoria, being Victoria, immediately went into damage control mode that would make a politician proud. She posted an official HOA statement claiming the taste was natural mineral deposits and seasonal changes in groundwater composition. Translation: nothing to see here. Stop asking questions, trust your benevolent dictator. But desperate people do desperate things, and Victoria was about to prove just how far she'd go to hide her environmental terrorism. She contacted the algaecide company, AquaClear Solutions, and tried to bribe the owner into destroying their service records. Offered him $10,000 cash to lose any documentation of their midnight pond treatment. The smell of her desperation could have cleared a room. What Victoria didn't know was that environmental services companies keep meticulous records, specifically because of legal liability, and the owner, a guy named Derek Thompson, recorded their entire conversation because something about a frantic woman offering cash bribes at 11 p.m. made his lawyer senses tingle. Legal warning. Attempting to destroy evidence or bribe witnesses transforms misdemeanor charges into felony obstruction of justice. The cover-up is often worse than the crime. While Victoria was busy trying to erase evidence, she also hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me, some guy named Rick Patterson who specialized in personal background investigations and looked like he learned his trade from bad TV shows. Rick started following me around town, photographing my truck, talking to my clients, trying to find anything that could discredit me in court. He even attempted to break into my truck one afternoon at the hardware store. I watched from inside the store as he tried the door handles, his cheap suit jacket stretching across his back. I called the police and had him arrested for attempted vehicle burglary. Turns out Rick had a history of overstepping legal boundaries for clients. His PI license was already on probation, but Victoria wasn't done. She filed anonymous complaints with the state contractor licensing board, claiming my solar panel business was operating without proper permits, complete fabrication. But it triggered an investigation that cost me 2 weeks and $3,000 in legal fees to resolve. The bureaucratic harassment was back with a vengeance. Except this time I was documenting everything. Every phone call, every complaint, every instance of her throwing government agencies at me like weapons. Surveillance tip: in harassment cases, always check your state's recording laws. North Carolina is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record every conversation without informing the other party. Meanwhile, the community health crisis was getting worse. A pediatrician in town noticed a spike in childhood stomach problems among kids from Magnolia Ridge Estates. Parents were bringing children in with symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning: nausea, stomach pain, headaches. The HOA board started receiving dozens of complaints about water quality. People were buying bottled water in bulk. Some families installed expensive filtration systems. The Facebook group became a support group for people convinced something was seriously wrong with their water supply. Victoria's response? Blame aging infrastructure and announce a special assessment of $500 per household for emergency water system upgrades. She was literally charging people to fix the problem she'd created. The board meeting where she announced this was spectacular. 80 angry homeowners packed into the community center, the air thick with tension and the smell of burnt coffee from the ancient community coffee maker. Parents stood up demanding answers, showing medical bills threatening lawsuits. Victoria stood at the podium in her designer suit, makeup perfect, voice steady, as she lied through her teeth about mineral deposits and infrastructure failures. The woman could have taught master classes in gaslighting. 3 board members confronted her after the meeting, demanding to know about the mysterious $3,500 landscaping expense from the HOA budget last month. Victoria refused to provide receipts, claimed it was routine maintenance, and threatened to sue any board member who questioned her financial decisions. That's when board member Patricia Morgan, no relation to Sarah, started doing her own investigation into HOA finances. Turns out using community funds to poison a neighbor's property counts as embezzlement under North Carolina law. The walls were closing in on Victoria from every direction. Her cover-up was creating new crimes faster than she could hide the old ones, and she still had no idea that I owned the water supply she just contaminated. I received one final threatening phone call that week. "Drop the lawsuit or you'll regret it." The voice was disguised, but the desperation underneath was unmistakable. My response was simple: "I'll see you in court." When a cornered animal realizes the trap is closing, it either surrenders or goes absolutely feral. Victoria Thornwood chose feral. Her final gambit started with a neighborhood-wide defamation campaign that would make a propaganda minister jealous. She created 3 fake Facebook accounts, complete with stock photos and fake histories, and flooded the Magnolia Ridge Estates group with posts about my illegal activities. According to Victoria's digital puppets, I was an environmental terrorist who deliberately contaminated my own pond to frame the HOA and extort money from innocent families. The post claimed I was running some kind of insurance fraud scheme, that my solar business was a front for illegal operations, that I had a criminal history, pure fiction, but posted with enough confidence that people started believing it. Defamation law. Creating fake accounts to spread false statements causing reputational or financial damage constitutes aggravated defamation and can trigger separate civil and criminal charges. The smear campaign worked on some people. I started getting hostile stares at the grocery store. 2 solar installation clients canceled contracts citing concerns about our business practices. Someone spray-painted "liar" on my truck in the Walmart parking lot. The cheap paint smell lingered for days even after I cleaned it off. But Victoria's desperation was about to lead her into truly stupid territory. She showed up at my house on a Thursday evening, dressed in casual clothes instead of her usual power suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. The sunset cast long shadows across my driveway as she walked up, her heels clicking on the concrete. "Daniel, I think we can resolve this like reasonable adults," she said, setting the briefcase on my porch railing. The leather creaked as she opened it, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills, $100,000 cash to drop all legal action and sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement. The evening air smelled like jasmine and bribery. What Victoria didn't know was that I was wearing a wire. Robert Martinez had suggested it after her PI got arrested, and I'd gotten very comfortable with the little recording device taped to my chest. North Carolina's one-party consent law is a beautiful thing. You're offering me money to cover up the fact that you poisoned my pond and contaminated your neighborhood's water supply? I asked, making sure the wire caught every word crystal clear. "I'm offering you a reasonable settlement to resolve a property dispute," she said, lawyer speak dripping like venom. "This is a good faith gesture to avoid protracted litigation." "Good faith gesture," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling attempted bribery now?" Her face went from fake friendly to ice cold in about 2 seconds. She snapped the briefcase shut, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the quiet evening. "You're going to regret this, Daniel. I have connections in this county that will destroy you." "I'll take my chances," I said. "Now get off my property before I add trespassing to the list of charges." She left tire marks in my gravel driveway, her luxury sedan spitting stones as she peeled out. Meanwhile, the environmental health emergency was reaching critical mass. The county health department had received over 50 complaints about subdivision water quality. Parents were documenting their children's symptoms: nausea, stomach pain, persistent headaches, even some cases of skin rashes from bathing in contaminated water. The EPA decided to investigate after a county health officer submitted an official concern report. When federal environmental agencies get involved, things escalate fast. They don't take kindly to contaminated drinking water affecting hundreds of families. EPA investigators arrived at Magnolia Ridge Estates on a Tuesday morning with water testing, equipment that made Dr. Mitchell's setup look like a high school science project. They tested wells throughout the subdivision, mapped the aquifer system, and traced contamination sources with the methodical precision of crime scene investigators. Their preliminary findings confirmed what Dr. Mitchell had predicted. Copper sulfate contamination was spreading through the entire underground spring system. Current levels in subdivision wells were approaching EPA emergency thresholds. Within another month, the water would be officially unsafe for human consumption. The EPA issued a public health advisory recommending Magnolia Ridge residents avoid drinking tap water. Until further notice, property values started dropping immediately. Nothing kills real estate prices faster than federal warnings about poisoned water supplies. Victoria's psychological breakdown was becoming visible to everyone. She was spotted at the grocery store having a screaming match with herself in the parking lot. Her husband Richard moved out, taking their 2 kids and filing for separation, citing irreconcilable differences and potential legal liability exposure. The HOA board finally voted to remove her as president after discovering she'd used community funds to pay for the algicide, the PI, and multiple other personal vendetta expenses. Embezzlement charges were filed with the county prosecutor. Her lawyer resigned, citing ethical concerns about representing someone actively committing crimes while under legal scrutiny. Everything Victoria had built, her social standing, her marriage, her position of power was collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane, and she still didn't know the worst part. She'd poisoned a water supply that legally belonged to the man she'd been trying to destroy. The final confrontation was inevitable, and it was going to be very, very public. The Cedar Brook Community Center hadn't seen a crowd like this since the county tried raising property taxes. Standing room only, 300 people crammed into space designed for 200. The air was thick with body heat, nervous energy, and burnt institutional coffee. TV news crews set up cameras in back. County sheriff positioned deputies near exits. EPA representatives sat front row with official badges and grim expressions. Victoria sat on stage with remaining HOA board members. Designer suit perfect, makeup flawless, but her eyes had that cornered animal look. She kept checking her phone, probably praying for a miracle. I sat third row with my team. Rachel Torres, Dr. Mitchell, Robert Martinez, Sarah Morgan. We had documents that would change everything. But first, we'd let Victoria dig deeper. Patricia Morgan, the new board president, called the meeting to order. We're here to address water quality concerns and discuss EPA findings. The crowd erupted. Parents shouted about sick children. Someone yelled about property values dropping $40,000 in 2 weeks. Demands for refunds, answers, accountability. Patricia raised her hands for quiet. The EPA will present their findings first. Dr. Sandra Murphy from the EPA didn't sugarcoat it. She displayed water testing results on the projector, bright red numbers, showing copper sulfate levels 4 times above safe standards. Contamination originated from industrial algicide dumping here, she said, laser pointer highlighting my pond on the aquifer map. Chemicals entered groundwater and spread throughout the spring, feeding your wells. Victoria squirmed like she was sitting on hot coals. Who dumped the chemicals? Someone shouted. Dr. Murphy looked directly at Victoria. That's a matter for ongoing criminal investigation. 300 heads turned to stare at Victoria. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Patricia cleared her throat. Daniel Thompson has information about property rights and water access. I walked to the microphone. Every eye followed. Cameras swiveled. Most of you know me as the difficult neighbor who wouldn't stop fishing, I started. Victoria Thornwood spent months trying to drive me off my property through lawsuits, harassment, and eventually environmental terrorism. That's slander. Victoria shot up. I never— Sit down, Mrs. Thornwood, the sheriff's deputy ordered. Not requested. Ordered. I held up my grandfather's 1952 deed. This document includes one specific paragraph I want to read. All water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereof, in perpetuity. Silence except for the projector hum. In plain English, I own the water rights to the entire aquifer feeding this subdivision. Every drop from your taps for 15 years legally belongs to me. The developer never purchased these rights. He just drilled into my water without permission. Confused shouting erupted. Anger, shock, fear mixing in the crowd. I held up my hand. I'm not here to bankrupt anyone. I'm waiving all back payments, about $30 million you won't owe me. Relief washed over faces. But Victoria Thornwood poisoned my pond with industrial chemicals, destroying 70 years of family heritage and contaminating water that belongs to me. Then she covered it up while your children got sick. Rachel stood. Mrs. Thornwood faces federal environmental destruction charges, state illegal dumping and embezzlement charges, and civil property damage charges. We have video evidence, recorded bribery attempts, and documentation of her using HOA funds for personal vendettas. The deputy walked toward the stage. Victoria went ghost white. This is a setup. He contaminated his own pond to frame me. Ma'am, I have an arrest warrant for environmental crimes and obstruction of justice. The room exploded as the deputy handcuffed her. You'll all regret this. She shrieked. I'll sue every one of you. That blue-collar troublemaker is manipulating you. Final mask gone. Pure rage and classism on display for 300 witnesses and 3 cameras. As she was escorted out, I returned to the microphone. I'm proposing a settlement protecting everyone here. Full environmental restoration funded by insurance and Mrs. Thornwood's restitution. No back payments for water usage and independent oversight to prevent future abuse. The crowd's anger shifted to cautious hope. Patricia stood. The board unanimously supports this proposal. Dr. Mitchell presented the restoration timeline. 18 months to clean water, ecosystem recovery, regular safety testing. Sarah Morgan's article would publish within the hour. HOA president poisons entire neighborhood's water supply and property vendetta. People filed out, some stopping to shake my hand, others processing everything. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability, community healing, and ensuring no one else would suffer under petty tyrants. Victoria Thornwood spent months trying to drive me off my land. Instead, she drove herself straight into a federal prison cell. 6 months after Victoria's arrest, I stood on my pier at sunrise, watching native bass fingerlings get released into the pond. Water crystal clear again, that clean mineral smell replacing the chemical stench that had haunted this place. Dr. Mitchell's restoration plan worked better than predicted. Natural bioremediation, strategic water cycling, and native plant restoration brought the pond back to life faster than expected. Monthly EPA tests showed contamination levels dropping to 0. Old Martha's descendants were thriving. The Grandfather's Pond Environmental Trust became something bigger than I imagined. Settlement funds, $250,000 from Victoria's assets and HOA insurance, created an environmental education program. Local schools bring kids out twice monthly to learn about aquatic ecosystems, water conservation, and protecting natural resources. Turns out poisoning a pond can lead to something beautiful if you're willing to turn tragedy into education. Victoria's legal aftermath was exactly what she deserved. Federal environmental destruction, state illegal dumping, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. She pleaded guilty to everything. 3 years federal prison, 5 years probation, $75,000 in restitution, 200 hours cleaning waterways after release. Her husband divorced her. Real estate law license permanently revoked. She lost everything trying to destroy one man who just wanted to fish in peace. Magnolia Ridge Estates underwent its own transformation. New HOA board implemented transparency policies requiring homeowner vote approval for financial decisions. They established resident rights protection committees and replaced Victoria's dictatorship with actual democratic governance. The twist nobody saw coming? I opened my pond for community fishing. Every Saturday morning, families from the subdivision fish under proper environmental management. Kids who'd never held fishing rods learned to cast from the same pier where my grandfather taught me. The annual spring festival became neighborhood tradition, celebrating restored ecosystem, community cooperation, and the idea that sometimes the best revenge is being better than your enemy. This year's festival drew 500 people, proceeds funding local water conservation. Sandra and I still sit on that old pier most evenings watching base jump at sunset. The wooden planks feel warm and smooth, worn by time and countless anglers. Children's laughter from the fishing program mixes with birdsong and gentle splashing. This place feels alive again. Our legal case set precedent. 3 other North Carolina water rights cases cited our settlement as a model for balancing individual property rights with community needs. Environmental law students study how we used leverage for restoration rather than destruction. HOA reform legislation passed the state Senate last month, inspired by Victoria's abuse. New laws require financial transparency, limit HOA authority over pre-existing properties, and establish penalties for harassment and power abuse. One woman's tyranny led to systemic change, protecting thousands of future homeowners. My solar business expanded into environmental restoration projects. Fighting an HOA tyrant and winning makes great marketing. I've consulted with dozens of property owners facing similar harassment, helping them understand rights and fight back effectively. Sarah Morgan's article spread nationwide, spawned a podcast series, and inspired proposed federal legislation addressing HOA accountability. One pond, one stand against tyranny. National impact. Here's what I learned. Never let petty tyrants make you abandon principles. Document everything. Know your rights. Sometimes the best way to defeat enemies isn't destruction, it's building something better from their mistakes. Your turn. Have you dealt with HOA nightmares or property rights violations? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else facing similar battles. Real experiences create real change. If this story of standing up to petty tyrants and protecting our environment inspired you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Next week, the city councilman who tried stealing a veteran's land through eminent domain abuse until the veteran discovered the councilman's own property violations. That karma was even sweeter. Remember, whether you're in North Carolina, Texas, California, or anywhere else dealing with power-hungry HOAs, you're not alone. Communities are stronger than tyrants. Truth is more powerful than corruption, and sometimes one person standing up for what's right changes everything. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and protect what's yours. Epilogue. 3 years later. The morning mist rises off the pond like it has for 73 years. But now there's something different in the air. Children's voices learning about water conservation, retirees teaching young kids how to cast a line, families gathering for weekend fishing that would have been impossible during Victoria's reign. Last month, the Nature Conservancy awarded the Grandfathers Pond Environmental Trust their Community Stewardship Excellence Award. The plaque hangs in my workshop, but the real prize is watching this ecosystem thrive. Again, Dr. Mitchell published a case study in the Journal of Environmental Restoration titled Community-Based Remediation, the Cedarbrook Model, Universities across the country now reference our settlement as the gold standard for balancing individual rights with collective responsibility. Victoria served her full 3-year sentence. I heard through the grapevine she moved to Arizona after release, working some administrative job under her maiden name. Some people asked if I felt sorry for her. Honestly, I hope she learned something, but I don't lose sleep either way. Richard Thornwood rebuilt his landscaping company from scratch, this time with actual environmental compliance. He stops by the pond occasionally with his kids. Turns out he's a decent guy who was married to a nightmare. His son caught his first base off my pier last spring. The Magnolia Ridge Estates HOA won a state award for transparent governance. They've become the model other associations study when reforming their bylaws. Patricia Morgan still serves as president, but now with actual checks and balances. My solar business doubled. Turns out the guy who beat the HOA tyrant is excellent branding. But more importantly, I've helped 17 other property owners facing similar harassment. 3 cases involved water rights. All 3 settled favorably after we showed them our precedent. Sandra and I got married on the pier last fall. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. The pond was glass smooth that evening, reflecting autumn colors. My grandfather would have loved it. The fishing program now serves over 200 kids annually. 5 of them have gone on to study environmental science in college, citing their experience at the pond as their inspiration. That's the legacy that matters, not the legal victory, but the lives changed. Sometimes I sit on the pier at dawn just like I did before Victoria, during the worst of it, and now after. The wood feels the same under my hands. The bays still jump. The herons still nest in the cypress, but I'm different. I learned that standing your ground isn't just about being stubborn. It's about knowing when something matters enough to fight for. Property rights, environmental protection, community well-being, these aren't abstract concepts. They're the difference between a pond full of life and a toxic waste site. They're the difference between a neighborhood ruled by fear and one built on cooperation. The other day, a young couple moved into Victoria's old house. They knocked on my door, introduced themselves, and asked about the fishing program. No entitlement, no demands, just neighbors being neighborly. We heard the whole story, the wife said. What you did for the community. That took courage, I shrugged. I just wanted to fish in peace. But we both knew it was more than that. It always is. Final thoughts. This story isn't just about one man versus one HOA president. It's about the thousands of people who face similar situations every year. Small tyrannies that chip away at property rights. Environmental protection and basic human dignity. The lessons are universal. Document everything. Every conversation, every complaint, every interaction. In a legal battle, documentation is your armor. Know your rights. Most people don't understand property law. Water rights or environmental regulations. That ignorance makes them vulnerable. Education is power. Build alliances. I couldn't have won alone. Lawyers, scientists, journalists, county clerks, each played a crucial role. Find your team, stay moral. I could have financially destroyed 800 innocent families to punish Victoria. Instead, I chose justice over revenge. That moral high ground made all the difference in court and public opinion. Think long term. This wasn't about winning a battle. It was about creating lasting change. The education program, the legal precedent, the HOA reforms, those impacts will outlive me. Don't let bullies win. The easiest thing would have been to sell my land and leave. Sometimes that's the right choice. But sometimes standing your ground changes everything. If you're facing a similar situation, an HOA overstepping its authority, property disputes, environmental violations, remember, you have more power than you think. The law isn't just for wealthy people with expensive lawyers. It's for anyone willing to learn it, use it, and fight for what's right. And if you're in a position of power, HOA board member, local official, community leader, remember Victoria's story. Power without accountability becomes tyranny. Rules without reason become oppression. Authority without empathy becomes abuse. The pond is quiet now. The fish are thriving. The community is healing. And I'm still fishing at dawn, just like my grandfather taught me 70 years ago. Some things are worth fighting for.